Hello, Pastor Josh here with your Tuesday Tea-ology. I hope that your day is starting well and you're ready to enjoy a nice break with me. I am enjoying a very fine Yorkshire tea today. Very good, especially a relief after last week's tremendous disappointment. And talking today about a religious, spiritual ideology that you may not have heard of. You may say, "Well, Josh, I haven't heard of any of these things you've been talking about." Well, this is a less common one in particular, and it's called animism. Animism, and animism has some difference from a lot of these ideologies in that most of them are centered around ideas about God. So, atheism says there is no God. Agnosticism says, I don't know if there's a God. And maybe it says that we don't know if there's a God. No one knows if there's a God. Depends on your kind of agnosticism. And uh, Polytheism says there's many gods. Pantheism says that everything is God. Panentheism says that everything is in God, or God is in everything. And when you come to animism, though, God isn't necessarily part of the picture. Now, God isn't ruled out either, but it's kind of operating on a different line. And animism is the idea that the spiritual world is very encompassing. So it differs from this in its focus really isn't on the question of God or gods per se, but rather on this idea that everything has a spirit. And so there are many spirits all around us. So whereas polytheism has this approach where there are several gods, perhaps many gods, and there might be gods of all kinds of different areas or different things. And pantheism says everything is or is a part of the one God who is everything. Animism is more like saying that everything is spiritual and has its spirit, or at least that many things are. So, for example, particularly animals. Animals might be regarded as having spirit, and even inanimate things like trees or rocks or rivers or something like that might be regarded as having spirits. And so they're not necessarily regarded as deities, and whether you worship them or not exactly may not be the question, but there is this sense of a vast world of spirits of whom you are a part. And so animism often comes with it might have a particular focus upon the earth, just as pantheism does, because the natural world is seen as being full of spirits. And who holds this? Who is an animist? I mean, you're not likely to find many people if you were to go around, if you went in the grocery store and there wasn't a pandemic going on, so you went around talking to everybody and getting in close, and you could hear each other because you weren't all wearing masks. And you took a survey of people and said, what is your spiritual, religious beliefs? These things, you'd find a number who said they were Christians of some stripe or other. You'd find some who said they were atheists, some who said they were agnostics, and or just didn't have a religious belief. You might find a few who said they were part of some of the other religions, such as Muslims and Jews and Hindus and so on. You you probably would find very few, if any, who would say, "I'm an animist." But nonetheless, it is a historical uh, religious belief, and it has something of a resurgence. That's something we've seen in other things coming back. So many, many indigenous peoples had animistic kind of beliefs. So some of what we know about Native American beliefs before the Europeans arrived uh, uh, could be described as, at least in part, animism, and the same thing for indigenous sub-Saharan African beliefs of people in Africa south of the Sahara Desert, and so on. And these things are not exclusive, all these different ideologies. That is, especially when you think of animism, because it's not so much about is there a god or different gods, but about a world filled with spirits. Of course, you can combine that, and you can have beliefs where there is this animism, and you also have a pantheon of gods. You're also polytheistic, or where you also are in some ways pantheistic. There you regard the world as full of spirits, and yet all part of one, or something like that. And if you think about that and you think about the way these things blend together, you can begin to see that where you might find someone who, whether they consider themselves an animist or not, is an animist, is in someone who is beginning to embrace this resurgent paganism that we see in the Western world. And I talked about this before. It's not hugely popular. The percentage of people who consider themselves witches, Wiccans, pagans, things like that, is still fairly small. But it is growing, and it is growing at a significant rate in recent decades. And that is one of the strange things about our time. Science and technology continue to advance, and yet there is a spiritual regress, so to speak. People going back to older and much more irrational, less intellectually grounded belief system. And there's a lot of factors you could take for that. I mean, there is a certainly our technology and our society has resulted in some people being cut off from nature, and so they want to seek a new connection with nature or something like that. It's a rebellion. It's a revolt against Christianity. Christianity is identified as an oppressor, and we're going to go back to the other religions that Christianity oppressed in their view of things, things like that, and this search for a mystical spiritual connection. And so probably the best analog that you'd most easily find is when you encounter someone who says, "I'm not religious, but I am very spiritual." Now, they may not be an animist per se, but their idea of religion is a focus on a sort of vague spirituality, whether that specifically involves everything having spirits, or whether that is a much more vague idea, which is probably more likely. There is a rejection of organized religion, because again, it's seen as stuffy and oppressive and everything else. What do we say to these kind of movements, to these ideas that instead of pursuing God, pursue either a real animism where everything has a spirit, or at least a lot of things have spirits, and you try to connect with them, or a sort of a watered down cousin of animism, a vague spirituality? Let's look at Psalm 96. Psalm 96 starts out like this. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name, tell of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the peoples are worthless idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. That psalm expresses some of the common sentiments of the Bible, that God is worthy of all worship and praise, that it is humanity is called to declare the glory of God, to proclaim what he has done. And that by contrast, all of the false spiritual and religious ideas of the world are worthless. Uh, Creation is not a substitute for God in terms of spirituality. Rather, as it says in verse 5, the Lord made the heavens. And you remember that's the first story in the Bible, that God made creation. He's different from it, and it's no replacement for him. It's no replacement for a relationship with him. Pursuing a relationship with spirit beings of any kind is no replacement for a relationship with the Lord who made the heavens, who is who of whom we can say splendor and majesty are before him, strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. We were created to know God, to love God, and to know the love of God, and nothing else can ever satisfy. And that's the thing to know as you talk with people. And you maybe meet some people whose spirituality is kind of vague or is focused on nature or connection with other things. That what they are really looking for and what they need is to know the God who made them and who loves them and who sent his Son for them. And so you find a point of connection and try to demonstrate that none of these things can ever satisfy, that they are idols, that they will prove hollow, that they cannot save, and they cannot give that fullness that our heart is longing for and that we seek in so many places. That only can be found in a relationship with God where we are returned to our purpose and our calling of worship, to magnify God, to sing to the Lord a new song, to declare his glory among the nations. Well, God bless you as you go through your days, as you declare his glory in the place where he has put you. And of course, for now, as you finish your tea. Take care.